Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it is time for a review of the new Horse Lords album, The Common Task. This is a new full-length LP from Baltimore-based quartet Horse Lords. This thing is out now via Northern Spy Records, and for a decade now, Horse Lords have been purveyors of an interesting blend of jazz rock, experimental rock, krautrock, and math rock. The band clearly takes notes from the repetition and layering of minimalist music too. However, it hasn't been until recently that the band's actually grabbed my attention, and they've done it with this LP, The Common Task, which feels less like a standard popular music album and more like a 5-phase sonic experience. Linear, ever-evolving grooves executed with fluid performances, a relatively crisp mix with a lot of separation between each piece of instrumentation, which you want because nearly all of the tracks here evolve into this polyrhythmic menagerie of sound. On the opening track, Fanfare for Effective Freedom, we have these thumping drums that are syncopating and slowly gaining momentum with these guitars, whose phrases are very much skipping along the groove of the track and sometimes feel really geometric in how angular and jerky they are. And for a good portion of this song, the band finds a variety of ways to treat and progress this groove in such a way where it is always changing but always feels the same, until there's a breaking point at about 3:40 where the band busts into these grooves and riffs that feel like a takeoff of some vintage psych rock. Add in these totally surreal, I don't know how they're doing it, very twangy swirls of guitar arpeggios that cycle as if a machine is playing them. There's also some chords squawking away in the right channel, block percussion creating so much noise and so much density all the way in the back. This thing really changes into a sonic madhouse just before it devolves into these drums syncing up with the guitars again that are just like muted strumming, so you're kind of getting that crunchy, distorted. I know the way I'm describing this probably sounds nutty, but it is a strange progression, and this is often how this type of music runs anyway. It's a lot of grooving, it's a lot of jamming, it's a lot of linear progressions. It really hypnotizes you, it locks you into one sense of momentum, and you're kind of moving through everything the band is presenting to you without any big changes into a verse, a chorus, a bridge, or anything like that. It's just this one idea, always changing, always shifting, and before you know it, by the time you're at the end of the song, where you are is entirely different than where you started. But still, as noisy and as rudimentary as this last passage is, it's still oddly gratifying. I would say the psychedelic nods are even stronger on the following track, where you have roughly the same instrumental palette, but now with some droning saxophones at the start that are a little woozy. These saxes and guitars build up to a point just before the halfway mark of the song, where everything is just wailing and layering in a way that's really tense. God, the performance on this track, and really everywhere on this album, it's so tight. The progressions and pacing of these songs are really a roller coaster of sorts, and it's that tightness in the performance that just straps you into it for the entire ride. So after these two monstrous and very thick cuts, the band decides to treat listeners to a different take on a bagpipe drone. Occasionally the sounds worked into this track do get a little grating, but one thing I like about the band on this one and on nearly every track here is that they flirt with the idea of getting a little abrasive, but they never overstep that line to where it's too abrasive, just enough to give these tracks more teeth, more tension. And this cut slips right into People's Park, and it's actually the first phase on this record I would dare say is somewhat pretty. Some of the more mystical bits of guitar combined with the bubbly synth arpeggios are quite cute. While I thought this track wasn't too bad as a teaser, as a single for the album, hearing it in context with the other songs here, I do wish it were longer. I do wish it had a bit more progression to offer like every other moment on this record. With it being structurally as simple as it is, it does make it stand out in a strange way. Still, it's a pretty quaint jam, and I do love the way it devolves into what sounds like this drum circle from the other side of the galaxy at the very end, with all of these drum hits layering on top of each other in a very alien way. And to top things off on this album, we have the 18-minute closer integral Accident. 18 15 minutes, which is pretty long, yes, but I guess if you're this far into the album, you are in it for the long haul anyway, so why not? Kick things off with what sounds like a field recording of people shuffling around in a large marble room. Why not? Ambient drones and gentle vocals calling out behind them? Why not? Weave in some violin and begin building things up with some rudimentary guitars and drums. I am with you. A saxophone then starts bouncing off everything they're doing. We get some bass, and now we're grooving. And not just grooving, because all the previous musical elements that were there are still hanging here and turning up. The vocals, the violins, the drones, the stern musical phrases. At this point, the song feels less like a jam and more like the soundtrack to some sort of occult ritual, with the last third of the song transitioning from what sounded like a sacrifice to now we're smearing the blood on ourselves and dancing around the flames of our, pig god. Then all of a sudden the entire mix is totally overtaken by these revving up ascending synthesizers, which, if we're sticking with the narrative I've given so far, could be representative of aliens just pulling all of the cultists into a tractor beam. Whatever your interpretation of this very lengthy piece is, and I implore you to come up with one because it is long, it's certainly evocative. That's the record. 5 tracks, 40 minutes and change. It's not too bad, a fun listen for something that is so weird and experimental. And keep in mind, I mean, this thing is not the most out there record on the block. It's maybe only going to be strange to those who have not heard too much in the way of krautrock or jazz rock, but still, it's pretty accessible too. Sure, there are points that maybe I wish were a bit longer or had more layers or had a grander instrumental presentation. I think the flow of the record is a bit peculiar too, with these very similar 2 tracks starting the whole thing off, ambient transition, People's Park that I think could have been longer, and then that massive ending cut. It's very lopsided. There's also the mix, which again, I did say was pretty clear and does present the instrumentation very nicely. You can hear everything and what it is doing with quite a bit of clarity, but still, I do wish it was a bit more vibrant and wet. Sometimes it is a little dry. Still, all those critiques are relatively minor, at least in my view, and stand in the shadow of just how great the performance is and how dizzying and engaging all of the progressions and compositions here are. Even though this record isn't the greatest thing I've ever heard in these styles, and there are some points where I'm reminded of other contemporaries of theirs that run a similar blend of genres like Zeus. The Common Task is a great LP that I had a great time with. I'm feeling a light to decent 8 on this one. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Horse Lords, forever.